Okay, so picture this. A king who has literally everything. I'm not just talking about being comfortable. I mean a huge kingdom, mountains of gold, unstoppable armies, the works. This was King Pasenadi of Kosala. By any measure, this guy had won at life. But what happens when the most powerful man around realizes that all his power and all his wealth, they don't have the answers? Well, he seeks out a teacher, the Buddha. Let's dive into the incredible conversation they had.
So this king's world, it was all about what he could see and touch. He could command legions, build palaces, grab any treasure he wanted. His whole identity was tied up in his status and his stuff. I mean, he was the top dog, the absolute peak of worldly success.
And yet, in those quiet moments when the court was empty and the generals had gone home, there were these questions, doubts, this feeling that even though he owned everything, he didn't really get anything. So he goes to the one person he thinks might have some real answers.
Now the king doesn't just show up and bow down. Nope. He approaches the Buddha with a bit of a challenge. His first questions are basically a test. He's one powerful man sizing up another, trying to see if this whole enlightenment thing is the real deal.
King Pasenadi looks at the Buddha, and he sees a man who's younger than he is, a man who gave up the very world the king commands. So he asks him straight up, "You're saying you've reached the ultimate supreme enlightenment? But you're so young, how is that even possible?" And you know what? It's a fair question, especially in a world where you usually think age equals wisdom.
The Buddha's response is just perfect. It's instant, it's calm, and it's brilliant. He doesn't get defensive at all. Instead, he flips the whole thing around with an analogy, using examples that a king would totally understand.
He tells the king, "Look, you should never underestimate a young prince, because one day he could be a powerful, fearsome ruler. You should never underestimate a small snake, because its venom can still be deadly. You should never underestimate a tiny spark, because it can grow into a raging wildfire." And then he brings it home. "And you should never, ever underestimate a young monk, because his virtue and wisdom can be immense." The point is powerful. True potential has nothing to do with age or outward appearances. Okay, so now that the Buddha has the king's full and undivided attention, he shifts gears. They move from talking about personal authority to the really big stuff, the fundamental problems of just being human. He's about to hold up a mirror to the king and, well, to all of us.
The king, he's worried about his kingdom, right? Wars, politics, managing all that wealth. But the Buddha redirects him. He says the real battles aren't fought out there on some field. They're fought inside our own minds. The real source of all our suffering, he says, comes from 3 internal poisons. First up, you've got lobha. We'd call it greed or craving. It's that constant nagging feeling of wanting more. More money, more pleasure, more status. It's that voice that tells you what you have is never, ever enough. Then there's dosa. This is hatred, anger, aversion. It's the force inside that wants to push things away, that creates enemies, that fills our minds with resentment and just poisons our peace. And finally, the root of them all, moha. This is delusion or ignorance. Now, this isn't about being dumb. It's about fundamentally misunderstanding how reality works. It's like a fog that keeps us from seeing things clearly, and it's this fog that lets greed and hatred grow in the first place. And what's the biggest, most uncomfortable truth that this delusion hides from us? It's this: everything changes, everything ends. The Buddha makes it crystal clear to the king, it doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, a king, or a peasant. Heck, even a fully enlightened being's body still gets old and dies. There are absolutely no exceptions to the rule. To really hammer this point home, he uses another incredible metaphor. He says, our lives are like clay pots. Some are fancy, baked in a kiln, beautifully glazed. Others are simple, plain, unbaked. But you know what? In the end, they're all just clay. They're all fragile. And they are all, without a doubt, going to break. It's a brilliant way to show just how temporary this all is.
So, if everything is temporary and suffering comes from inside us, what are we supposed to do? Just give up? No. This is where the conversation pivots from the problem to the solution, from the diagnosis to the practice.
This is the king's next logical question. It's the one we all have, right? If my giant armies and my vaults of gold can't protect me from the real threats, getting old and dying, then what can? How are you supposed to find any real happiness or security in a world that's so fragile? And believe it or not, the king himself actually provides the starting point for the answer. He tells the Buddha about a chat he had with his wife, Queen Malika, and they both realized this same surprising thing. After looking everywhere, there's no one in the whole world they love more than themselves. Now, this isn't about being selfish, it's just a raw, honest look at our basic drive to protect our own well-being.
The Buddha hears this and says, exactly, you've got it. And if you truly, deeply love yourself, then you won't harm yourself. And how do you do that? Simple. By cultivating goodness. By choosing actions, words, and thoughts that don't harm others. Because what you put out there ultimately comes back to you. Real self-care is being a good person. Then the Buddha brings it right back to something the king can understand. He says, you think your elephant corps, your cavalry, your chariots keep you safe? That's just external protection. It's temporary. True protection, the kind that lasts, is internal. It's having good conduct in your body, your speech, and your mind. That's a fortress no one can ever tear down.
The conversation is winding down, but the Buddha has one last, urgent lesson for the king. And this isn't just some nice philosophy to think about later. This is a matter of life and death, and it's happening right now. And to really drive home just how urgent this is, he asks the king to imagine something. Imagine a trusted messenger runs up to you, breathless, with a dire warning, a warning about a force that cannot be stopped.
Imagine, he says, that from the east, a mountain as high as the sky starts rolling toward you, grinding everything in its path to dust. You can't outrun it. You can't fight it. What would you do?
And before you can even process that, another messenger arrives. There's a second mountain, just as big, coming from the west, and then another from the north, and a fourth from the south. You are completely surrounded. There is absolutely, positively no escape.
And then the Buddha reveals the chilling metaphor. Those 4 mountains, king, they are aging and death, and they are rolling in on you and me and every living thing from all sides all the time. Your armies, your plans, your money, it's all completely useless against this.
The king is just shaken. He gets it. When you're faced with a reality that terrifying, that unstoppable, what is there to do? And the Buddha gives the final, simple, profound answer. Live a good life, practice righteousness, do good deeds. Because when those mountains finally arrive, the only fortress you'll have is the goodness you've built. So the only real question left is, what will you build before they get here?